Council would like to acknowledge the traditional custodians of the land in which we live and work, and pay our respects to those past, present and emerging. Welcome to you all. My name is Katie Towers and I am the Survivorship Lead at Cancer Council New South Wales. I'm very happy to finally be bringing you this webinar tonight on life changes in survivorship. It will include some real life stories from those who've gone through it, and also the challenges that were faced from the carer's perspective as well, and also some strategies from a health professional on how to manage these changes in life beyond cancer. Tonight, we are aware that everyone has been dealing with a lot of change themselves in life, with some heightened emotions from COVID-19. So I thought it important to kind of outline support available specific to this area as well. So we'll be dotting some of that in there as well. One main difference you may have already noticed is that we are filming from home for the first time in a very long time. But also there's a reminder that we are recording tonight's webinar. So everyone who has registered, you will be sent a link to the webinar once it's finished next week as well, and as well as some resources that we've put together specifically on this topic. So let's get started. Firstly, I'd like to introduce our panel. So we have Kate, Alan and Maxine, who have generously donated their time to contribute to tonight's session. So thank you so much for doing that. We also have Laura, who is helping us out in the chat box. So please say hi to Laura. We will have time for questions at the end of each presentation, and we'll also do a special slide all about the questions that have come through in the registrations previously. If you do have any questions that are medical specific, you might be best to refer to your healthcare professional. If at any stage you need to talk to someone immediately, please don't hesitate to call Lifeline on 13 11 14, and they're available 24/7. I'm just going to take you through some of the functionalities of the page that you can see. At the top of the screen, you'll see the green button, which is the slides, so you can skip ahead if you like and see what's coming up. You've got the chat box in purple, which will come up as a pop-up box. We do encourage you to contribute to tonight's session. Let us know what's resonating with you, what's not, any strategies that have worked for you as well. And we can always come back to any questions that come up in there as well. You've got the resources in that blue icon. So that's where you can download the supporting resources that we have available for the webinar. You've got the survey in yellow. Before you do log off to the webinar tonight, we would love for you to take part, and it only takes about 5 minutes to complete the survey. It can be completed at any time throughout tonight as well, but if you do stick around, we'd love you to fill that out. In red, you've got your notifications, and that's where we'll send out any alerts or announcements that come up. My favourite part is in the blue there. That's where we've got the map. You can actually see where people are tuning into tonight's webinar from across the world. You'd be surprised how many people from across the world log in. You've also got the help button, which can help you with if you're having any sound issues or you can't see us or whatever it may be. And then the additional information, which has things like our privacy statement. So I'm going to kick off with Alan King and Kate Lyons, who will be telling us about their story and their experience with the life changes from cancer. Thank you.
Thanks, Katie. Good evening, everyone. My name's Kate Lyons, my husband, Alan King. I'll do a bit of an intro, but to Katie's point, today is National Reconciliation Day and it's Reconciliation Week, and it's very important to thank and respect the traditional owners of our land. And a big call out to those in Alice Springs that I met a couple of years ago, particularly in PY women who welcomed us to the Larapinta Trail. Look, tonight Alan and I are going to tell our story. We met when we were 19. You can see that photo there when we were at university together. We've had a pretty happy life. We've got 3 beautiful kids, Michael, Angus and Isabella. And you can see them in that photo there on the rock. That was on a family holiday in Tassie. We love doing bushwalks together. And the final picture on that slide is Alan and I at the Barossa Valley bike riding around the vineyards there. That was our last, what we call before cancer holiday. And we thought that we were so lucky, the happiest couple, 3 really healthy kids, and a marriage that was going very well, still very much in love. And things were about to change for us, and we didn't even realize it. But before I pass on to Alan to tell the crux of the story, I'd like to say we wanted to do this conversation tonight to share our story because the Cancer Council made a real difference to us. Even when we just found out Alan's diagnosis, there was a lot of literature, a lot of information, and all of the support that was available made us feel like actually we're not the first people going through this. It's something that happens a lot more commonly than you might realise. A lot of people and families get touched by cancer, and the Cancer Council does a great job of providing information, support. I tapped into a lot of their reading materials, to their counselling service, and if you need it, there's a lot of advice on financial support and a whole range of things. They've done an amazing job supporting us, and so we wanted to share our story. And hopefully by telling our story, we can help other people as well. So thank you to the Cancer Council. Over to you, Al.
Yeah, so we moved pretty quickly from that picture of the vineyard. That was for our 20th wedding anniversary. I think that was in September. December of that year, I started to get really severe pains in my leg. My legs got very numb. I went to the GP, had some scans, and a bunch of scans later, they ultimately identified 2 really quite large tumours in my back. So I started out with testicular cancer, but it metastasized and shifted to my lower back. And the tumours, one was like a mango size, and the other one was slightly smaller than that. But they were big, and they were pressing on these nerves that were leading into my legs and causing the most ridiculous amount of pain. And that was pretty much the end of December. I was diagnosed pretty much at the start of January and put straight into chemotherapy. The idea being that they wanted to reduce the size of the tumour to take the pressure off those nerves and to get rid of the pain, because I was on a lot of painkillers and nerve pain agents. And it did. It worked pretty immediately, actually. Within the first week or so of chemo, that pain went away because the tumour had started to reduce in size. And I was pretty lucky in the sense that I had testicular cancer, which is quite responsive to chemotherapy. So I went through quite a bit of chemotherapy, 3 months, of a really intense regime where you have 1 week in hospital, you're on a drip sort of 6 hours a day, and then you're 2 weeks at home recovering, and then you go back in again. And the minute you're starting to feel a bit better, you go back in and get more chemotherapy again. And that went on for 3 months. I won't go into details, but it wasn't easy. It was quite difficult. And we got to the end of that, and it worked to some extent in that the tumours had reduced in size, which was great. But because they were so large to start with, and I kind of think it was because I'm quite old for my type of cancer. My type of cancer is more a cancer that people in their 20s get. I think I may have had it for quite a while, which is why they grew so large. And the chemotherapy did reduce them in size quite a bit, but they were still there.
It was only 50% reduction.
Yeah, but still it was a reduction, yeah. And they still, it still kind of worked. I had a testicle removed in late April, then I recovered from that, and because the tumour was still there, I had to have some pretty major surgery towards the end of July, where they pretty much sliced me down the front, sort of removed my innards, and went digging around in amongst my nerve and back to try and dig out the remaining tumour. So I was about 8 hours on the operating table, and it was a big operation. Came out of that, had another scan probably 2 or 3 months later, and there was still residual things showing up on the PET scan, which suggested that there might be cancer there still, or not. They couldn't really tell whether it was inflammation from the surgery or whether it was cancer. And we had a decision at that point because I think up until that point that the protocols I was following were pretty standard. You know, if you go through chemo, then you go through that surgery. And usually for most people, the chemo would sort it out. Very few people get to the surgery, but then even having not had it sorted out after the surgery, that was really quite unusual. And there were a few different options available to us, and we actually got a second opinion, and I would advise that. That was a really good thing to do, and the oncologists that we talked to were very collaborative. You know, they were very supportive of us getting another opinion. We went and sought that opinion. They provided a different perspective on what we should be doing at the time. And because one wanted to go to do more chemotherapy, which would have been really horrible. The other one said radiotherapy would probably shift it. Another guy, our surgeon, said don't do anything because it's just inflammation. So you can sort of imagine we were really confused at the time. In the end, we decided to do radiotherapy just to tidy up the remaining bit of tumour that was there. And the good news was in January this year, it was tidied up, touch wood. I mean, they say with my type of cancer that if it's going to come back, it'll come back in the next 2 to 3 years. And if it doesn't come back within 5, you've pretty much cured it. So anyway, here's hoping. The pictures there, that was me just having a bit of fun with the kids. That was soon after diagnosis. Oh, not that picture. Hang on, I'll go back. Just with the mohawk. It was funny. I mean, my daughter was pretty upset that I was going to lose my hair. I think she was more upset about that than me being diagnosed with cancer. And we decided just to have a little bit of fun and have a bit of a funny haircut. And I thought I'd just embrace the whole losing the hair by just shaving it off. I had a bit of a mohawk for a bit, which was a bit of fun. And then just to talk a little bit about the year of treatment without dwelling on it too much. I guess it was characterized by treatment, then recovery, then treatment, then recovery. And as soon as I was sort of healthy enough to take more treatment, and I started to feel a bit better, they just hit me with more treatment. So it was an odd year in terms of feeling better, then feeling worse, then feeling better, then feeling worse. And the things I really struggled with were definitely being transitioning to being an invalid. You know, I'm typically a really, really active person, always doing stuff around the house, always playing with the kids, always out and about in the community. And to go from that to literally not being able to do anything, particularly with the pain I was suffering right at the start and the chemotherapy, was probably the toughest thing. It changed my identity. I mean, I found a lot of my sense of worth was around doing things and doing things for others. And all of a sudden, everything was being done for me, and I really struggled with that as an idea, and that took a lot of adjustment. But I adjusted to it in the end. I thought, actually, you know what? There's few periods in your life when you accept the help of others, and people actually want to help. That's another thing I learned last year, that they want to help and they feel good about helping. So I learned to accept help and to just be okay with not doing anything. Even though at the start that was a really strange thing for me to get my head around. I was lucky to have a very supportive wife. Kate has a big job, but she did really drop everything. She didn't miss one appointment last year, and she was always making sure I was okay. So I was really thankful for that. And the kids were also really lovely as well. You know, I had a very physical relationship with them prior to cancer. Our relationship revolved around playing together, and it really quickly went from playing to talking. You know, I couldn't move. I was laid out for the first 3 or 4 months of last year, and we just spent a lot of time just cuddling up and talking, and that was really lovely from them. You know, I didn't really expect them to do that, but they sort of initiated that and embraced it, which I thought was great. We had a huge amount of support from the community. Kate will talk about that a little bit, but that was incredible as well. Just the way the school community particularly rallied around us and gave us a lot of support. The chemotherapy phase was really hard. Hospital was horrible. You were sick, just weren't feeling well. In the weeks at home when you were recovering, time moved so slowly. I found that was one of the hardest things as well, is how slow time moved because I was really sick. I didn't fancy reading. I didn't fancy watching TV. I didn't fancy doing anything. So I just lay staring at the ceiling for days on end, and that was really tough. One tip that I kind of wish I'd learned earlier, and I'm not really a computer game nerd, but actually computer games were an incredible way to pass time. I just started playing these really long computer games, and it made time go a lot quicker, and that was really a good thing.
And it wasn't the sort of machine gun game that I expected either. It wasn't a gardening game of some sort.
Oh yeah, it was all sorts of funny games that we played. Yeah, no, it was good though. That helped time move more quickly, which was great. The physical changes were really hard to deal with. I spent the whole year getting myself fit, only to have more treatment and go right back to square one again. And I remember partway through last year questioning, what's the point of getting fit again if I'm only going to just be not fit again? After the next phase of treatment, I'm going to go completely back to square one. But then Kate was and I sort of mentioned this to Kate, and Kate always said, yeah, but if you weren't getting fit again, you'd go back even worse than square one. You'd be, negative square one, or whatever the right phrase would be, if that makes sense. So, I was getting fit to go back to zero again, but if I didn't get fit, I'd be going back to, negative 10 or whatever, if that makes sense.
I kind of thought it would be more like it would take you even longer to recover on the other side.
Yeah. So I took my job last year because I wasn't working. My whole job was to be focused on getting better. So I was pretty religious in terms of doing as much as I could do from a rehab perspective, going for walks as soon as I could go for walks, coming off painkillers as soon as I could come off painkillers. All that sort of stuff was pretty important. Cognitively, that's been a real issue, and I'll talk about that in a sec as well, but I wasn't as sharp, and that's been the ongoing issue that I've really experienced, I found, and I think it was from the chemotherapy particularly, because it's a full body kind of toxin that you have. I found that it really fried my brain, and it's still fried, unfortunately. I became incredibly forgetful. I can't structure my thoughts as well as I used to. I'm not as articulate as I used to, and it didn't really affect me too much last year. I mean, there was the interpersonal relationships with friends and family, which weren't as easy as they used to be, from being able to express myself and interact with them and make small talk perspective. But, on the whole, I was just sort of pottering around the garden, and it wasn't until I came back to work that it became a much bigger issue. I found I was much more irritable. I had a lot less patience. I can't be really bothered with the process of discussing alternate points of view. I just found I just couldn't be bothered with that. My brain couldn't process it, and I became very irritated because my brain couldn't process it, which is, it's really difficult. But it wasn't all bad. It was a great opportunity to completely wind back from a very demanding job. I think there's not many opportunities in life where you get to sort of call a pause on literally everything, and just live life in slow motion. And I kind of did that. And it does give you a different perspective on things and what's important, and that's changed for me as well. There's some pictures there of what life was like. Me being bald, me enjoying a day at the beach.
It was exhausting going to the beach, wasn't it?
Lying down. That's how I spent my life. Largely was on the couch. We went out for my birthday. That was nice. But it was a funny year. It was tough. It wasn't an easy year. But there were some good parts about it as well. So this year, I got given the all clear, which is great. I was very quick to go back to work. I don't know why I was that quick to go back, but pretty much a day after I got given the all clear, I rang my boss up and said, right, I'm great. I can come back. Maybe it was about me wanting to do the right thing by my work, who'd been great, very supportive. They were a great company. And I wanted to do the right thing by them, and they were really keen to have me back. And maybe I just wanted to be normal again. I felt detached from society after, by just sitting at home the whole time. And I just wanted to get back into the real world again. And I felt in my mind I was mentally and physically okay, and there's no real reason why I shouldn't go back to work. And I understood that I had underlying cognitive issues. Talking and all the rest of it wasn't as easy as it had been. But I was still pretty confident I could do my job. And the first month, I was working really quite light duties. My work said, come back, we'll give you some easy stuff to do, and we'll just ease you back into it. And I did that, and it was okay. But then in the last sort of month or so, I've been moving into much more demanding duties. And this is where I found my cognitive issues are becoming much more of an impact. I'm struggling to have sort of high-level conversations. My job was a pretty high-performance job. I had to talk to senior business executives and be thinking on my feet the whole time, and I just couldn't do that like I used to. It was really clear, and I found I got exhausted. Just yesterday, I was running a 2-hour meeting or a 1-hour meeting, and I was just I couldn't, after about the first hour, I couldn't concentrate anymore. And I just couldn't, you know, it was really, really difficult. And at the end of it, I was completely exhausted. And I used to run, you know, 1-day workshops and 2-day workshops and then do something in the evening with them as well. No problems. But, you know, after 1 hour, I was completely wiped out. Casual conversations around the office were difficult. You know, nothing came as easy as or comes as easy as it used to. You know, thinking, writing. I used to have to write big reports. I can't do that anymore. Talking. I just don't find I can do the same things I used to do. And this is even just doing 3 days a week school hours. I find by lunchtime I'm completely shot from a fatigue perspective. So at the moment I'm really questioning my ability to do my job anymore. My doctor advised, I'm talking about it with my oncologist and also with a psychologist who specialises in cognitive issues after chemotherapy, and the recommendation has been that I should step back for 6 months and focus on some rehabilitation that's less pressured, because it's clear I'm not really coping at work. So that's interesting. You know, it's difficult not knowing what the prognosis is. Like, you know, you talk to people and will I get better? And the jury's out on that. It's unlikely, is what people say, particularly if I haven't got better after 12 months. You know, I've heard other podcasts and other people talk about this issue, and they say you just have to get used to a new normal. And this is how it's going to be. Well, that's going to be really difficult as far as my old job goes, because I can't do that job if this is the new normal. So yeah, it's tricky, and it's something I'm struggling with. And it's only in the last couple of months since I've been back at work that that's really come to light, and is something that I'm thinking about having to deal with. And it's not just the work. I mean, home's really tricky as well. You know, I've lost the quickness in conversations around the family. You know, when you're talking to family, you can't think of the words, and you know, it just really dents your confidence and your ability to interact with the rest of the family, and also beyond the family with others as well. It's really difficult, and coupled with, you know, I don't have the patience I used to. I'm irritable. I can't be bothered having long extended conversations. It's difficult. I feel like I'm not the person I was, and particularly when Kate's been so supportive over the last year, I feel that's pretty unfair on her as well as me to some extent. So, you know, who knows where we go from here. I'm hoping things will improve. I'm hoping my mind will get better, but maybe this is the new normal and I have to adapt to it. And I don't know, because I think I'm still quite new to sort of trying to cope in the real world, back to my old life again. And yeah, I just don't know how I'm going to come out of this on the other side. But I've started to live life again. It was me with my Mr. Mates. We went to Bangkok late last year, and we've had some lovely beach holidays. So there's a lot of life that's getting back to normal, and a lot of it's better than it was before, which is great. But yeah, it's the cognitive issues I think I'm really struggling with post chemotherapy and treatment.
You do have a richer relationship with kids.
Yeah,
absolutely.
Yeah, that's true.
I think you were off with them at a time when you were able to sort of be around more and support them and encourage them through school, and the report cards have never been better.
Yeah, it's great. I mean, that's been a real positive.
You're developing them. It's really beautiful. My turn again. So I'll talk a little bit about the carer role that I found myself in, and I like this image of the duck, and ducks sort of paddle hard underwater, but it looks like a pretty sort of calm demeanour on the surface. And I think that's how I felt a lot last year, particularly having a busy life with 3 kids. Look, I think we went through a bit of a wobble when we first found out what was going on with Alan, and it really did knock me. Luckily, my sister from Brisbane was around with her kids, and she took our kids up to the Blue Mountains for a long weekend, and we just sort of had some time to get our thoughts together. And that's probably when I read a lot of information from the Cancer Council about how do you tell kids what's going on here? What's the right amount of information for them to handle for their age and stage? And we kind of got a bit more information and understanding ourselves. So look, I suddenly found myself as a carer, you know, a mum of 3 kids, that I was trying to keep things as normal as possible for them. At work, I lead a team, and I have a really interesting job, but a very supportive company, and they operate on a very flexible basis at Suncorp, and I was able to get the right balance. My boss's boss said to me, just take any time you need. Your family's number one. And I did find that, my hours were a bit different. I'd log in when I needed to. The weeks that Alan was in chemo, I'd sit in the hospital, and while he was asleep, I'd just log in and go through and do a range of work activities. But you pretty soon realise that this is a game of patience, and you have to take things one step at a time. So it takes time to sort of diagnose what's wrong. Can you stop playing with it?
No, it's frozen. Our camera's frozen. They can still hear us, but it's frozen.
Oh, okay.
So I was trying to fix it. Just keep talking.
Okay.
Sorry.
I was wondering what you were doing. So where was I? Yeah, just going through that whole sort of waiting until you actually got a treatment plan. I thought it just seemed to take forever, and patience is not one of my greatest virtues. Every time we'd go for a consultation, I'd expect there to be right, here's the latest set of results. It means
Bear with us, guys. We've just lost the voice. Won't be too much longer. This is the joys of dealing with working from home and all of the different ways that we're working. So it shouldn't be too much longer. We'll say I'm quite enjoying the conversation from Kate and Alan. It's really nice hearing about the different ways that they've dealt with it. What we might do, if Maxine, you're okay with it, I might jump straight to Maxine, if that's okay. Is that okay with you, Max?
Sure.
Okay, thank you. I'm just going to hand over to Maxine, and we can come back to Kate's presentation soon.
Thanks, Katie. Okay. So I'm just going to talk a little bit. As a counsellor, I've specialised and worked with people affected by cancer for a long, long time. And so some of the information that I'm going to share with you is very much more generic, and I'm sure some of you will have related a lot to what Kate and Alan have said. And for others, that might not have resonated with you, but hopefully some of this information that comes up now will. And please post any questions you might have. Now, as Katie mentioned at the beginning, COVID hasn't exactly enhanced life in many ways. And so COVID-19 and cancer, there's added stress, added challenges. It could take the form of online or phone consultations. It could be that you've had to change chemo regimes. And it could be that there's been delayed treatment, or in fact, there's less availability to go and have scans. And also that there's been no support person allowed in the hospital sometimes. So people have been going through treatment on their own. There might have been, if you're reliant on transport, there's been fewer drivers available to take you to appointments. So there's been a lot of changes for people. And in the early days, when hospitals were going into, preparing for influx of patients with COVID, then, there was also talk of maybe cancer treatments are going to be suspended. So I'm imagining that some people watching this tonight may well have had quite a few challenges and hiccups along the way because of the situation we're in now. Some people have had hyperfractionated radiotherapy. So instead of having radiotherapy over several weeks, it's been condensed into having perhaps twice a day for a shorter period of time. Some other people have noticed that there's less queuing and waiting around in hospital than there normally is. There have been some pluses, maybe more sitting in the car and less in the waiting room. But also going to blood collection centres, having extra cleansing practices, being able to get your bloods taken, and some of that being more efficient. So I'm just trying to move on to the next slide, so bear with me, which is, there we go. Oops, back. Always happens, it goes far too far. Let's go see if I can get it to go back. Okay, let's start again. There we go. So I want to just touch on when it all falls apart, and I've also called them heart-dropping moments. And I'm imagining that some of you watching this tonight will have known what this feels like. The physical sensations of shock, the emotional outbursts, anger, crying, whatever it might be. The fact that your mind races a million miles an hour, you know, what will this mean for my life? What's it going to do to everybody around me? How am I going to be impacted? How are they going to be impacted? What the heck does this mean for work, etc.? And then sometimes people start to try and be really practical and organized and try and get very realistic, but you still don't really know what's going on. So whilst you're trying hard to avoid thinking and trying hard to distract yourself with tasks, nevertheless, you can still be struggling and needing to fight your emotions versus being very, very practical. So that's quite a challenge. For some people, if you're living alone, how on earth are you going to manage? As we've heard from what Alan was saying, the amount of treatment he went through, and I'm aware that different cancers require different treatments, but the amount of treatment you go through, if you're living alone, how will you manage? How will you keep yourself going? And one thing that we do know happens quite often is that people say they're not very good at asking for help. So even though you might need help, even though it would be wonderful to have some support, actually being able to ask for it is a whole other story. And these are the sorts of things that at the Cancer Council, the 131120 team are addressing all the time, because these are the sorts of things that people ring up and talk about. Let's go to the next one, if I can. Okay, sorry about that. There we go, relationships. So the other thing that you may well have experienced yourself, if you in this audience have had cancer, you may know that people somehow seem to avoid you. People that you thought might rally round sometimes don't, and people that you never imagined would come to the fore. So it can be extremely challenging, because people you were expecting to get help from, you're no longer getting that help from, or they can't cope, they can't manage, and they actually actively, in some cases, avoid you. Some people love a bit of drama, and they will be there and be very supportive to you, but it's because they're involved in the drama of the whole situation. Other people that you never imagined will come closer will do. And in the impact of reaching out to different people for different types of help can be really hard, as I said on the last slide. But what you get from that is a richness of saying, okay, this person's really good at taking me to appointments because they're really calm and they drive well and they don't freak me out in the car. And by the way, they don't ask me awkward questions. If I want to talk, they talk. And if I don't, they don't. Or you might say, oh, this person's got a great sense of humor, and when I'm feeling really low, I need them around me because I need them to help boost me up a little bit. So friendships often change quite dramatically around cancer. Let's talk about intimacy. Your needs, if you have a partner, your partner's needs, what's that all about? How's that going to be impacted by all the treatment and all the challenges you might be facing? Children's needs. Children are often a lot more resilient than we might think, and I'm sure that Kate and Alan will have something to say, may have some more to say about that. But in general, if children feel safe and secure, they tend to manage reasonably well. I think Alan mentioned something about his daughter was more concerned about Alan's hair than about the cancer, and that's a very typical reaction of a child. If you're trying to work, Alan was just explaining how he has gone back to work and some of the challenges he's facing. But sometimes people try and do things for you, or you might get marginalized into lesser tasks, which may suit you, or it may not. And you might find that you're removed from your job. You might find that you're pushed into a role that you don't want to do. it's very important to check, are your legal rights upheld if you take time off? Well, you know, are you being treated right by those people who are employing you and people that you work with, your colleagues, who themselves will be impacted by their own worries about the cancer? I'm just going to move on to the next slide. Can we do that? I'm just having trouble getting onto there. Support. Okay. It's really hard to do this alone. So I've already mentioned that the Cancer Council on their 131120 number offers or puts you in touch with a whole range of services, including counselling and legal and financial support. There are local cancer support groups. Currently, many are meeting online, but it's a space to talk with and listen to others who have been through cancer and who therefore get it in a way that other family and friends might not. Friends and colleagues who can be with you and with whom you can just be, like I was mentioning about, you know, the person who will drive you to an appointment and not put any pressure on you to have to talk, they're the people you want to surround yourself with. And one of the things that we talk a lot about is being kind to yourself. Don't push yourself too hard. Don't bottle up the emotions, because bottling them up doesn't actually help. They come out eventually, and the more you bottle them up, sometimes they come out with more intensity than they would do if you let the emotions come out just as they need to. Do the tasks you can do and keep your mind engaged if you can. Alan talked about playing games, video games, he found more useful than anything else in terms of passing time, endless time. Next slide. Let's see if we can go there, because that's support for carers. So again, carers can get support from the Cancer Council on 131120. And there are plenty of services from the Cancer Council for carers too. Not only has the person who has the cancer diagnosis had a shock, but when you're the carer, you've had a shock too. And often you're required, as Kate was describing, to keep everything else together as well. So trying to keep working, looking after the children, and being there by Alan's side when she could be at all the appointments, as he said, takes an awful toll on carers. So it's important that you know that you have your needs to be taken care of as well. Ask for help. Hardest thing for some people to do, but it's really stressful being a carer, and it's really stressful to keep ploughing through without seeking help. The help might be practical, it might be emotional, it doesn't matter where it's from, friends and family, or professional services. All things that you might want to feel that you don't want to have to do, but if you do, it will help. And it could make a big difference to the quality of life for you, and in turn for the people that you are looking after and supporting. So I guess the message here is, please don't sit back. Please go out there and look for support and help. Let's have the next slide and see. It's doing it again. So if cancer comes back, you know, even if you suspect that there could be a recurrence of cancer, when you have it confirmed is like another one of those moments of shock, heart-dropping moments. And just because you've had cancer once and you've done it once before, or maybe more than once, doesn't mean that you find this time any less of a shock. The fears come back. Different fears might come, the effort ahead, what kind of treatment is there going to be, the whole process that you've got to go through can feel like a mountain to climb. And you know what? Getting yourself together energetically, let alone emotionally and practically, to face whatever comes next is not easy. So again, call on your support systems as soon as you can. Gather your crew around you to help you navigate through the next step. And seek formal support, such as counselling, to help you through. It's out there, and it's there for you to use. So if there's one message to take away from tonight, it's please put your hands up and ask for help. Those are the main slides that I wanted to put, and I think, Katie, we're going to take over from here.
Yes, I'm just going to jump straight back to Kate, and hopefully we're all set to go.
Thanks. Can you hear me?
I can hear you, yes.
Oh, good. Look, I can't get control of the slides. Oh, here we go. Let's come back. Can you see the... Shall we go back to the carer slide that I had on there?
Yeah.
Cut in? Okay.
That one's the duck. Yeah.
Yeah, look, I think we're going really well, sharing lots of information. Just to Maxine's point around asking for help, a good friend of mine said to me early on, Kate, I know that you're very independent and strong-minded, and you don't easily ask for help, but this is a time when people will want to rally around you and help. And she said, just accept it graciously, and everyone will want to do something, and there'll be a role for different people. So some of the things that really helped us, I thought I'd share with, because there's no way I could have done all of this. Being a carer, being there for all your medical appointments, being there in hospital, made sure the kids got to school, sport, play dates, got dinner on the table. There's no way I could have done all of that on my own. And so it's the troop that rally around you and offer the help that means you can get through it. So I'm lucky enough, we don't have family in Sydney, so I managed to have a sister or a mother or a sister-in-law come and spend a week with us when Alan had to go into hospital for a week. And that meant that I could go and spend as much time as I wanted to at the hospital with Alan in those really intense chemo weeks. And I knew that someone who loved our kids was there with them, and would be able to bring them up to the hospital to visit for brief periods when Alan was okay for visits. Another beautiful family, the Davidsons, who are very good cooks themselves, decided that they wanted to take ownership of meals. And maybe you've never heard of it, but there's an online website called Meal Train, and it's a way that people can volunteer to provide you with a meal on a daily basis. And people will, send out an email to all of the people in the network. And we had someone volunteer to provide us a meal every night for 3 months during Alan's chemo. And look, it was a great practical dimension because I didn't have to shop. I didn't have to think about meals. I didn't have to clean up afterwards. Maybe I'd had to worry about getting some containers back to someone. But in addition to that real practical element, it felt like we had the love and support of the family that donated that meal that night. And the kids would be like, was this such and such a friend's family that did this? One night we had the Solomons deliver a meal that was made by the son who's Michael's age, his father and his grandfather. And it was a traditional Sri Lankan meal that did us for 3 nights, actually. They provided so much. So it's the heartfelt gesture that came along with the food that was just really uplifting and supportive. With the kids at the age and stage that they are, they're not independent enough to do everything for themselves. They play a lot of sport and have activities, but they have a beautiful friendship network. And what we were able to do is say yes, yeah, Gus wants to take you to cricket, Gus wants to take you to soccer, yeah, that'd be great. And then the kids would get a lift to the soccer game or the cricket game. They'd often go and have a play date afterwards. So they kind of got a lot of lovely time with really good friends during this period as well.
I think people like helping, and it makes them feel good as well to be able to help.
It's a great support, it really is.
It was great.
And I've got a few good buddies who know that I like walking the streets as a good form of exercise. And when you're a carer, it's important that you look after yourself. You don't actually have any time to get sick or to get exhausted. You've actually got to make sure that you invest a bit of time in your own self-care. And I had a couple of friends who would be like religiously, Kate, I'm showing up at your house for a walk at this time on this day. And it was a bit of exercise. It got me to have a bit of time with my friends. But also it was almost quite therapeutic having someone to talk to. And sometimes we'd talk about nothing to do with Alan, and sometimes we'd talk about everything that was on my mind about Alan. And I won't forget the commitment from those people as well.
Can you still hear us?
Okay. Yeah, I can hear you. You're fine. Yeah.
They couldn't hear us. Keep going.
Accepting support is really an important way. Well, it was a godsend. It really helped us get through. There were times where I have to get really organised and roster, who's helping do what. I even had someone offer to contact all the kids' school books at the start of the year, and I said, oh yes, please. And this mother did a much better job at contacting kids' school books than I ever would have. It was fantastic. So I think I agree with Maxine. Definitely accept all the help that you can get. And if there are people who want to help and don't know what to do, it might just be something that take the time to think about how they can contribute. But yeah, the other thing I found was I kind of got a bit emotionally full. There were times where I just thought, I can't handle anything more than what I've got on my plate right now. And I'd hear someone in my family talk about how my sister's having a really hard time with this, or oh, poor so-and-so, they've got this going on. And I actually had to say, it's going to sound really awful, I don't want to hear about it. I can't deal with anybody else's stuff right now. I've got enough. I'm full. And I think my mum and people that I said that to respected it. But I think there's a theory that I heard about later, which is, if the cancer victim suffering is in the middle of a circle and they've got people rallied around them, and as you go out of the circle, people are sort of not as close, so it's immediate family, close friends, etc. Don't go into the circle with problems. Let the people that are in the middle of the circle go out to their support networks wider to help solve the problems. And I think that was really good for a while, and I didn't want to burden Alan with what I was thinking and what I was worried about, because it was so important for him to have a positive outlook. And there was one time where I decided he was just completely deluded. And I will quote, this is my favourite quote, towards the end of chemo when he had no hair, he'd been through the ringer. He said, "Oh, it's not like I have real cancer." And it just floored me that he was so positive that he thought he was just going to get off this lightly with a bit of chemotherapy. Even though it was really intense and awful, he actually believed that he didn't have real cancer. And to me, that was just so deluded, because he was going through, I'd seen it on the scans. It was a mango-sized tumour, and the pain that he was in was incredible. Yet he was still kind of in this mental state that was really positive and probably really good for him to get through. But I didn't feel like I wanted to convince him that he was deluded. I wanted to leave him in that frame of mind of it's going to be okay. And I think he upheld that until that news after the major surgery, the zipper surgery as the kids call it, that he did kind of get a bit shaken, that now what? We've done all of the orthodox protocols of treatment. I'm now in that sort of small category of people that might not get through. Statistically, what does that really mean? And there's a lot of rabbit holes that you can go down in your mind when there's uncertainty or you've got to make really hard decisions through the process. Alan mentioned we got a second opinion. The phone calls I had to make and the begging that I had to make to get onto another oncologist list that was pegged as an expert in this field was definitely worth it. He challenged our oncologist to think differently about what the options were, and between them, they were very collaborative, and they came up with a better plan around the radiotherapy that did work ultimately. So, look, if it does come back, we know Alan's got another chemotherapy option that could still help. There's always, well, there isn't always, but hopefully it doesn't come to that for sure. I think I might move on to the next slide if I can. Whoops, gone too far. Alan sort of talked about his new normal, and you can probably guess what I'm going to say. I mean, after Alan got better from the radiotherapy, we did a beautiful little trip to Barrel and took a nice bushwalk, which is one of those things we love to do. That's on top of a table mountain. And the other picture there is a note from a recent Mother's Day, where my son put this photo in and his personal message to the school newsletter for Mother's Day. And Those words really touched me and threw me back to what we were going through last year. And, talking to the kids now, they'll say, yeah, we were worried about Dad for a while, but we knew it was going to be okay and we could see him getting better. And we never lied to the kids about what the outlook was. But I think it was a really big plus to try to keep life as normal as possible. There were times where I did have a few tears in front of them, but there were times where I cried my heart out in the shower and didn't want them to see how much I was hurting. It's really hard thing to go through, and it's hard to keep it all together. And I think there's some days where I just don't know how it all came together. I don't know how I got the kids off to school, how I got to work, and how I got through a day of, people at the office just complaining about really trivial stuff and things that weren't important. And some of the conversations I had to have, I just thought, what, why are you worried about these silly things, And I get to the end of the day and go, how did that actually happen? How did I get through it? But you just take each day as it comes and keep going. And so now, look, Alan's feeling better. And you've heard him talk about how his attempt to go back to work has been a struggle. I guess one of the things I'm really struggling with is I don't have the same partner that I had when we went bike riding around the vineyards. The cancer's taken a massive physical toll on him. It's taken a massive mental toll on him. Our relationship has weathered the treatment. There's still a lot of love and a lot of care, but some of the things that we used to enjoy, we can't enjoy anymore. So there's just TV dramas and mystery shows and police investigation things that I just don't enjoy watching with him, because how many times do you have to explain the plot and what's going on and who these people are? It's not enjoyable. Some of the sort of lengthier debates and discussions that we used to have, they're just things that don't happen anymore. But I'm not giving up hope that they won't happen again. And I think we're lucky that there's still that underlying love, and that, I have hope that things will get better. But he's a beautiful dad to his children, and I've got a huge amount of respect for him. Cool. Before we get all soppy, COVID disruption. I want to make sure we've got time for questions. So just quickly, the big disappointment for us was we were planning to have a celebratory trip to Europe. We had flights booked to go to London to see where we used to live 10 years ago and visit friends, Italy, Croatia, visit my sister in Hong Kong. For a while there, we thought we might be the only ones travelling around because everyone would be scared about COVID, but with the restrictions, it just wasn't going to happen. So in 2 weeks' time, we would have been flying out. I hope that we can do that trip again next year. At the moment, we've just come off the back of working from home. Well, you're not working now, but I've been working from home for a number of months and homeschooling. And today is the second day that we've had 3 kids at school. Hallelujah. It's so good that they're back with their friends, and it's a lot more peaceful and easier to work from home at the moment. So that's the main thing. I think at the start of the COVID outbreak, though, I was really nervous about Alan getting the disease. The chemo damaged his lungs quite materially. He would be a heightened risk should he contract the disease. So to a large extent, I was just really happy to get him home, not going out and isolate everyone in the family and really protect us in our own little bubble. And at the start, I thought, thank God we weren't going through chemo, because I know the immune compromised position that you're in as you're going through all of that treatment, and it must be even harder when there's this fatal virus lurking around society. So I do feel for any of you out there that are going through treatment right now. It's really tough. I
Thank
think
you.
that's all I can say. Yeah, thanks, Katie.
I'm just going to jump straight down to the questions that we got through the registration process. I think there's been some fantastic presentations tonight. I know we have our technical difficulties, but it's been so good to hear your stories, and also Max for your ideas with strategies and everything like that. The first one I think I might throw to Maxine and just say about, are there any strategies for people who are all alone? I mean, when you've got no partner, you've got no kids, no pets, and lost a lot of friends, and you might be dealing with some bullying and stress from work.
Yeah, Katie, I think the most important thing here is to start looking for some professional support, because you're never all alone. There's help out there, and as you've heard me say a couple of times tonight, and Kate mentioned it as well before, 131120 will guide you to some professional support, which can give you the prop and maybe guide you to some other resources as well. So I would just reach out to something professional, and 131120's got a whole range of options for you.
And I think the next one kind of will also relate to the most recent times with COVID-19. And I mean, the bushfires, to me, they feel like so long ago, but it was only the beginning of this year when we were just praying for rain, and that's all we wanted. But it can be quite triggering for some people in the anxiety that they feel from these big life events that are happening. So Max, would you have any kind of ideas with dealing with this kind of triggers?
Yeah, well, a few things come to mind straight away. The mere fact that you are aware that you are feeling triggered, we'll use the word triggered. The mere fact that you know that your anxiety is heightened means you go, okay, I now need to reach out. I need to talk to someone. I need to go address this. It is very common for events that might not even impact you directly, but they are. For example, you might not have been directly impacted by bushfires, but, you know, we all did live through quite a challenging summer of fires. So you don't have to have something happen to you directly for the anxiety levels to flare up. And so it's really important, again, if you know you're feeling more anxious, that's okay. You're feeling more anxious. Go talk to someone. Go talk to a counsellor. Talk about it. It will really help. Trying to push it away is probably the worst thing you can do. Trying to ignore it won't help.
Yeah, thank you. I think even just like a webinar like tonight, I think even just putting it out there and saying, you know, these are difficult times, and what happens when all these big life changes occur, and how do we deal with them? And it's not a one size fits all, and everyone will deal with things differently. The next one I might jump to is the asking for help when, I mean, Max, you cover this a little bit with your talk, is asking for help, and what strategies can I use to overcome this or reduce this in going out there and asking for help? I mean, Kate and Alan, you might have had some experience with this yourselves.
Yeah, I think I did touch on that. I think I mentioned Annie, you know, encouraged me to accept that help widely. So, yeah, we said, yes, please. Those meals were beautiful. Walking with my buddies, family coming to help. All the beautiful friends of our children would take them to sport or let them play afterwards. It all made a huge difference.
I did love that that circle of problems, like don't bring your problems into this circle. I think I've written that one down because it resonated quite well with me as well. But like you said, there are these great apps that are out there where, I mean, if apps are what work for you, where you can put in your help and reaching out for help for people, and it might be as easy as that, because you might not want to talk to them. It just comes up with, I'll come and give you dinner. Yeah,
it's really beautiful.
Yeah.
I think also we were lucky. We did have the Cunels talk to us, because Sean had cancer, and when he found out about Alan's diagnosis, he made a real effort to come and talk to us and say, look, it's going to get rocky, it's going to get hard. Why don't you try and find someone that's a counsellor that you can talk to, that you're comfortable with? Source them before you need them, was some really good advice. Yeah, and that probably encouraged me to talk to someone early through the cancer counsellor. Actually, was one of your counsellors, and really helpful. And the beauty of a cancer counsellor, that's a tongue twister, was that they knew about all the other resources to point me to. So yeah, it's get some emotional support before you need it.
And also just finding the right counsellor for you as well. Like it may not be you meet that person then straight away you bond and you want to open up to that person. It's the same with any kind of, like you were saying earlier about the second opinion. You can go to a second, third, fourth person until you feel comfortable in disclosing how you're feeling with someone, because that relationship is going to help you in the end more than anything. Max, did you want to add anything to that one?
Yeah, I wouldn't mind just saying that it's really helpful. You're absolutely right to not necessarily settle for the first counsellor that comes your way. If it doesn't work, it doesn't work. It needs to feel okay pretty much straight away. But the Cancer Council counsellors all have oncology knowledge, training and background. So therefore they do have the capacity to give you information, not medical diagnostic information, but support information, and also are very well aware of what you are going through in terms of side effects and potential side effects that might come. So I think it's worth seeking out specialists.
Yeah, thank you. So Alan and Kate, can you tell us what helps you the most to cope emotionally during the cancer journey? I think this also kind of relates to a question that's come through the chat box about coping with it, I mean, in a practical way as well, finding that new difference in the relationship, Kate, that you mentioned during your presentation. How did you deal with that?
Yeah, it's not easy, right? Because it's very easy to think, oh, he's all, my partner's through it. Now we can get on with the life we had before, and it just doesn't work out like that. And I think we had a lot of friction. To be honest, I think we've had some of our worst fights ever. But I think what we had to do was just actually get brutally honest. Going back to that circles piece, I had to tell Alan honestly what I was really feeling and what I was really going through and what it meant for me. Something that I hadn't necessarily done a lot through his treatment around. I would go outside the circle. But now, if we're going to find a way forward, we've actually got to really communicate well. For me, that means picking the time of day. So Alan gets really fatigued. If I start a conversation at 8 o'clock at night, and the bell's probably going on his attention span, I can't start a conversation at 8 o'clock at night. That's not going to end in a kind of, I can't handle it, or a fight to shut it down, or a, lack of patience. It's just got to pick my timing of when to discuss things. And we've been going for walks. So during this time, we've had a lot more time at home together, and it's probably been a good thing for us because we've talked through a lot of things, and we've been going for a walk just for 45 minutes or an hour every night, and just getting some fresh air and exercise and a download and catch up on the day. I guess, doing different things. Hopefully we'll be able to go and play golf together. Alan's a fantastic cook, so we've been having some great meals. But yeah, I think, things are different, and there'll be a new good. Don't give up.
So I guess, Alan, what's been the biggest change to your outlook on life after diagnosis?
Yeah, it's funny. People always ask while you've got cancer, whether there's any epiphanies that have happened, and you change your perspective. And at the time, I think you're just dealing it day by day. Like you've got the horizon of just trying to beat the cancer, and that's what you're focused on. So you don't really think about how your life's changed. But I think once you've got through that, you do think about things a bit differently. I think cancer can be a blessing in some ways, in that it forces you to stop. Because we were both living a pretty crazy life. Big jobs, working hard, 3 kids, nannies, all the rest of it. And the fact that I just had to stop all that literally overnight helped me to reprioritize things in a way that I don't think I would have. I think I would have just kept blindly going on the path I was going on if something like this hadn't made me stop and think about what's important. So yeah, it definitely has changed my outlook on life. And you go into a slow motion as well. So cancer's your whole life goes very slowly with cancer after it being very fast. And just appreciating that slowness and that time to have conversations if you see someone in the shops. Whereas always I'd be rushing from one thing to the next. Whereas now I really appreciate time and slowness and time to do things. And yeah, that's difficult to change. And so you do reevaluate how you want to live your life after cancer. I have, for sure.
So he says cancer is a blessing. There's another quote for you. It's a perpetual optimist.
There's definitely
but
good bits to come from that.
I think that goes to how did Alan cope through it. He doesn't go down those rabbit holes. He's always like, well, it could be a lot worse, and that kind of catastrophizing about how much worse could it be. So actually, I'm okay. It could be a lot worse.
Yeah.
Positive.
Yeah. Yeah.
So I guess it's kind of like, were you given any, apart from the advice and things that you've talked about already that have helped you with life after cancer?
Yeah, I think it's my big thing is worry about what you can do something about and don't worry about what you can't do anything about. And throughout the whole treatment, there's active things you can do. But then there's things which just need to take its course, and you just do what you need to do, and you just worry about things when they need to be worried about. So there's another question around how do you cope with fear of relapse. That's the kind of the same thing. Well, I don't really think about it. I guess I'll think about it in the 5 minutes before I go and talk to the oncologist about my next scan results, my next blood test. But I can't do anything about relapse in between, so I don't think about it. And
he's genuine there. He doesn't.
Yeah.
The week before, I'll say, fishing. Are you thinking about it? What should I be worried about? And he's just not worried about it.
Yeah. So I just park things that I can't actually do anything about in the back of my, Well, there's no point thinking about that stuff. Worry about it when it needs to be worried about, and just get on with life otherwise. Because there's a lot of things you can't control with cancer. So don't fret about it.
Control.
Max, did you want to add something about the fear of relapse, that last question we've got?
Yeah, because I really admire Alan's optimism is fantastic, and I really admire that attitude. And I think some people can have that attitude, and it's wonderful. For those who can't, one of the most important things is if you're feeling scared, acknowledge you're feeling scared. Even though it doesn't change anything, the worst thing you can do is try and squash emotions that need to come out. Find someone to talk it through, and express the emotions. So don't bottle it up if that is what you're feeling, because that doesn't help.
Thank you.
Yeah.
I might just go over to the next one. Thank you very much for your questions. I'm just conscious of us being a little bit over, but that's okay. I know that we've touched on little bits and pieces on COVID-19 because that is a situation that we're all dealing with at the moment. But I just wanted to highlight that Cancer Council have put together a web page which is specifically all about cancer and COVID-19. It is updated as things progress and as the restrictions are eased and what that means for the cancer community. So feel free to pop over to that page. The Cancer Council have also put together the Cancer and COVID-19 podcast. So these are new, and these are great to get some more information about things like telehealth and what it means for the cancer community. And if you need any information on the health information line and the online community. So I can't speak highly enough about the Cancer Council online community. It's a great resource for anyone who's maybe you've got a friend or relative or yourself have had cancer. You can pop on there and it's like a blog. You can let all of your, I call it you just let it all out onto the page, whatever time of day or night, whatever it may be. It may be 3 in the morning, but that's okay because it's having that community there available to you. And just to talk a little bit about that good old 13, 11, 20 number that we've heard a few times tonight, and there's a reason why it's spoken about so much is because it's such an amazing resource at Cancer Council. It's kind of that gateway and also to other programs and services, but the person on the other end of the line can really talk with you about what you're going through and be that listening ear when you need them. and Lifeline as well. That's 13 11 40. They're available 24/7. Okay, so that will bring us to the end of our webinar. I do want to remind you about our exit survey. So the page will redirect you to a survey at the end of this webcast, and it can also be accessed at that yellow icon at the top of the screen. A link for this webinar and the resources and everything you need will be sent to you next week. But lastly, I just want to say a big, huge thank you to Kate and Alan and Max for contributing so much tonight. It's actually been really, really great to have your perspective, have your experience and everything that you've gone through in the strategies as well. And I really appreciate you taking the time out tonight. And also thank you to Laura, who's on the web chat there as well. So thank you very much, Laura. And just a special mention to Dry July as well, because they've helped support us here tonight in putting the webinar together. And I really appreciate that. So thank you all very much and have a good night.